Cloud is better. Shalom, Erev Tov, good evening from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Mr. Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in the United States of God of Israel, bless America, in 1981, in New York State, and now celebrating our 41st year. Today is Wednesday, December 21st, 2022, in the Gregorian calendar, and it is the 28th day of the 9th Israelite Hebrew month of Kislev in the Hebrew Israelite calendar year 5783. We now is the fourth day, which begins the night before of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah Festival of Lights to all our viewers and listeners, wherever you may be. Welcome to episode 38 of our weekly Root and Branch Association Torah Fellowship seminars, chaired by Rabbi Hanania Weitzman, who is the fellowship chairman. As I say each week, and it's more true each week than the week before, Rabbi Weissman is a giant of our time. He is one of the very few, not the only, thank goodness, maybe we have a minion, one of the very few rabbis who stood up to the regime here and what happened. The little boy said the emperor has no clothes, would not participate in any way with justifying giving extermination injections to the inhabitants of the land of Israel. What's the latest development at the Supreme Court? The court said to our Mengele Ministry of Sickness, may we please see your agreement with Pfizer? And with a straight face, they said, we lost it. That tells you the enemy is on the run. So Rabbi Weissman earned the right to talk about Torah. Unfortunately, in the last 2 years, I'd say about 95% of our rabbis and rabbinical institutions, I'm very sorry to say, lost it. But at least we know now, right before I hope the arrival of Mashiach, who is a real rabbi and who ain't. And now, without further ado, let me hand over the mic to our host, Rabbi Weissman. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Lowell. Welcome to the program, everybody. Happy fourth night of Hanukkah from Israel. Today, we're going to start off with the Parsha and use that as a launching pad for a class on prepping according to the Torah. I put links in the chat box, and I'll add it to the Rumble, to the notes on Rumble as well, to two articles that I wrote about prepping according to the Torah. Now, what is prepping? Prepping is a concept that's been around for a long time, but only in recent times with the shortages, the panic buying, it's become much more mainstream. Prepping essentially means to prepare yourself in case of emergencies or all kinds of things that could go wrong. Power outages, storms, shortages, famines, wars, tyranny, etc. Anything that can and might go wrong, there are people in the world that are preparing for it, and they've made an entire lifestyle out of it. Now, what does the Torah have to say about this? Meaning to prepare for problems that may come in the future, not certain things by any stretch of the imagination, but things that are plausible, things that might come. How much effort should one put into preparing himself, even possibly to the extent of going to great extremes to prepare for all kinds of far-fetched and not so far-fetched scenarios in the future? What does the Torah have to say about that? Now, those who are listening to the shiurim that we did about the Sefer HaMaspik L'Ovdei Hashem by Rabbi Avram, the son of the Rambam, about the topic of bitachon, already should have a good idea about the answer to this. But of course, there are many more sources that are more focused on this particular question. And the main one, I think, comes from this from this week's parsha. So we're in Miketz. We're going to start with the parsha, then we're going to go through some other sources, and then we're going to finish with one final source from the parsha that I think will tie everything together. So we're going to start with Perek Mem Beis, Pasuk Aleph, that's chapter 42, the first Pasuk. This is when the famine was in Egypt. Vayar Yaakov Kiyesh Shever b'Mitzrayim. So Yaakov, of course, was with his sons in Israel. The famine had overtaken the entire region. In Egypt, they have food. So Yaakov saw that there was food in Egypt. Vayomer Yaakov Levanov. So Yaakov said to his sons, Lama Tisra'u. Why should you Tisra'u is one of those words that can be translated many different ways depending on how you explain it, as we'll see. But the root of the word is to see or to be seen. Okay, there is a Targum Yonasan ben Uziel that translates it differently from the lashon of yirah, which is fear, but that's not how any of the other commentaries translate it. They all translate it as basically having to do something with seeing something or being seen. So we'll start with Rashi. Lama taru atzmechem b'fnei b'nei Yishmael u'b'nei Esav ki'ilu atem tzveim. Why should you show yourselves? Meaning, why should you be seen? Why should you show yourselves before the children of Yishmael and Esav, the goyim that are living around you, as if you are satisfied, as if you have plenty of food? Because at that point, even though there was a general famine, the family of Yaakov and his sons, they still had plenty of food. So therefore, they didn't need to go to great lengths to buy more food. However, everybody else who had not been prepping was scrambling for food. And Yaakov said to his sons, why should you basically be seen? Everybody's going to be acting a certain way during a time of crisis. They're all going to be stocking up on food, and you're going to be sitting pretty as if you have lots of food. People are going to be looking at you funny, saying, why are these people not worried about the famine? Why aren't they doing anything? Why aren't they buying food when there is still an opportunity to do so? Okay, and this fits with a concept that's very popular among preppers, which is going gray, as they call it, which means that when there is a crisis and you happen to have stocked up, you shouldn't show off how much food and ammunition and other supplies that you have, because then that only makes you a target. Other people are going to be desperate, and they'll know that you have lots of stuff, and they will target you. Whether the government may target you, right, or other people, your friends and neighbors, or even your family might target you if they're really desperate. So therefore, you should cover up the fact that you have been prepping for all these years. You shouldn't advertise it to your friends and neighbors. And therefore, when there are, let's say, bread lines, even if you don't need the bread, you should still go on the bread line. You should act like everybody else, so nobody should look at you funny. So Rashi's first interpretation seems to be fitting with that prepper concept, that you should be stocking up on food because he and his children did have plenty of food. However, in the time of crisis, you should still basically act like other people are acting. Don't stand out. Okay, Rashi now gives a second interpretation. V'linira, and to me it seems pshuto. Again, the pshat of the pasuk, we talked a lot about that last week. Lama tisra'u. Why should you be seen, or why should you be looking? Lama yu kol mistaklim bochem umasmiya bochem. Why should everybody be looking at you and wondering about you? Very similar to the first interpretation. He's just altering a little bit the meaning of the word, but the essence of the pasuk would be the same, which is everybody would be looking at you, that everybody is scrambling for food before everything runs out, and you aren't, that you shouldn't cause people to be looking at you. Shamati, from others I've heard, that this is a lashon of becoming weak. He's translating the word differently, that it means getting weak. Why should you become weak in the hunger, meaning that you're sitting around doing nothing? There's a food shortage. Get up and do something about it. Stock up on food. Otherwise, the famine will hit you and you will become weakened. V'domelo, and there's a similar usage of the word in Mishlei, umarve gamhu yore. That's Mishlei Perek Yud Aleph Chaf Hey. Where there, it's actually a different root of the word. Marve is umarve gam hu yore. So marve is spelled mem resh vav hey, but then yore it says at the end, and in that pasuk it means getting weak, is also the root of that word is yud resh aleph. However, Rashi doesn't seem to like this interpretation, even because he saves it for last. That's not the one that he chooses for himself. The second one is one he chose for himself, and the Ramban and others attack this particular interpretation. They say that this is not what the word means over here, that it's a different word in Mishlei altogether. Okay, the Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, we also talked a lot about him last week. He argues with Rashi and explains the pshat differently. He says, "Kumo lechav in Israel ponim." He says that there's a similar usage of the word in Malachim Beis, Perek Yudalid, Perek Ches, de Amatzia. That was by King Amatzia. Shehigis daito laharos kedulaso liyoash melech Yisrael. That he was arrogant and he was showing off his greatness to Yoash, the king of Israel. Amatzia was the king of Yehuda, the two tribes, and Yoash was the king of the 10 tribes at the time, and they were rivals. So Amatzia was showing off his greatness. Okay, so that's the lashon of the word seeing or being seen as showing off. Afkan, so here too, says the Rashbam, Lama tisro b'ifnei b'nei adam. Why should you show off before other people? As if you are people who have plenty of grain, plenty of food to meet all their needs. That you are tarrying here in Israel, where you don't have food. So he's arguing with Rashi in the sense that Rashi said that they did have plenty of food, but they shouldn't advertise that fact or act in a way that is drawing attention to themselves. Rashbam is saying, no, they actually didn't have food. They didn't stock up just as everybody else didn't stock up, or maybe they weren't able to. They had, whatever food they had, and now it was running low. And Yaakov was saying, why are you acting as if you have lots of food when you don't have lots of food? You're waiting for everything to run out totally. Maybe you are relying too much on Hashem to change nature for you. If the way of the world now is to go to Egypt and buy food, then don't wait until the last minute. Go do what everybody else is doing. Go down to Egypt and buy food. Right? Everybody's going down to Egypt to buy grain. And you're sitting around and you are showing as if people are looking at you, and you're showing off as if you have lots of food when you don't. So it's some kind of a bluff or laziness, or you're waiting for Hashem to do nace for you that you're not really entitled to expect him to do. Yaakov was pushing his sons to go down to Egypt and buy food because they didn't prep enough, or at the very minimum, they shouldn't wait until the very last minute. Ibn Ezra explains as follows: Vayar Yaakov, and says, Lama Tisro, Al Tisro sheyesh lachem hon. Don't show off as if you have lots of wealth. That's his first interpretation, which is again very similar to what Rashi says. Alternatively, Al tu merivim zeh im zeh. Do not be arguing with one another. Kamo nisra eponim. So he finds another similar usage of that root of the word in Divrei Hayamim Beis Parachafe Pasuk Yud Zayin, which was a lashon of are fighting with each other, like it's sort of like showing an angry face or showing an antagonistic face to one another. So apparently, according to the second interpretation of Ibn Ezra, the brothers were quarreling with each other. They didn't have enough food, and each one maybe was blaming the other one or expecting the other one to do something about it. Whose fault is it that we're stuck, that we have to go down to Egypt? Whose job should it be maybe to go down to Egypt? It's not clear what they were arguing about, but there was some family tension, according to Ibn Ezra. And Yaakov was saying, why are you squabbling with each other? Go take care of the problem. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. This is not a time to be pointing fingers and blaming each other. Just go down to Egypt and buy food and solve the problem, which is an important lesson, not so much in terms of prepping, but in terms of crisis. If there is a food shortage or there's some other crisis, it's very natural for people to point fingers, for there to be tension. Everybody's under stress, and they're worried, and maybe they feel that other people are the cause of their problems, but that's not a time to be pointing fingers. That is a time to be unified, to have teamwork, to be working together to solve the problems, and not be pointing fingers at each other. So file that lesson away. That's not really the point of this year today, but I wanted to bring that up because as we may be anticipating shortages in times of crisis and stress and problems, certainly when the government is bringing this all upon us and they want us to be fighting with each other, this is a time even more so than usual to counteract that, to have unity and brotherhood and act as a team, because we all have the similar problems and we all have a common enemy. We shouldn't be pointing fingers at each other, but we should be pointing fingers at the people in power that are doing this to us and banding together to solve the problems. That's Ibn Ezra. We'll see the Sforno and the Ramban. Sforno says, Lama tisro, lama sabitu ze el ze. Why are you looking at each other? Each one is looking at his fellow to go down to Egypt and buy the food, right? There were 12 brothers, right? Yosef was already in Egypt, so he had 11 brothers, and they're all sitting and looking at each other, waiting for somebody to do something. This wasn't a time to be looking around at each other. It was a time for somebody to take charge and take action. Ka'amram Zal, as Chazal said, Kedera de Shutfi lo chamima velo karira. A pot that is owned by two partners is neither hot nor cold. It's a figure of speech by Chazal that if there's a job that is shared by two people, each one is going to be waiting for the other person to do it. He'll say, well, I don't have to do it because he'll take care of it. So no one's going to turn on the fire. No one's going to turn on the stove because each one's going to be waiting for the other guy to do it. So the same thing here, where one brother, in theory, could have gone down, or two, and brought back food for everybody. So everybody was waiting for someone else to take care of the problem instead of somebody stepping forward and taking charge. That's what Yaakov said. If there's a job to be done, shouldn't be everybody's looking at everybody else, waiting to see who's going to step forward and do it. Everybody should be a leader. Everybody should take charge and just make sure the job gets done. And he also gives a similar usage of the word in this context. V'chein nisra eponim shenireh zeh et zeh. So he uses the same source as the Rashbam. That was with the two kings, Amaziah and Yoash, that they were going to be glorifying or showing off to each other their greatness. So Sforno quotes the same pasuk, but he explains the word in that context differently, that they will be looking at each other. Okay, not necessarily showing off, but just looking at each other. Everybody's sitting around looking at each other, but not taking any action. And finally, the Ramban, how does he explain these words? So the Ramban first goes through some of the other interpretations, and he questions them, and then he gives his own preferred interpretation. The Nachon, what is right, says the Ramban. Lama tisrob and Makamase. Why are you being seen in this place? That you should have gotten up and traveled immediately as soon as you heard that there was food in Egypt, right? As soon as you heard that there was an opportunity to stock up in a time of famine, you should have jumped up and taken advantage of the opportunity. Because they were already in danger. If they don't hurry to take care of it, because who knows how long the gates will be open, who knows how much food they'll have to sell, who knows how much food they will be willing to sell. If you have the opportunity now to take care of it and to prepare for the famine, and you're already dealing with the famine, don't wait until the last minute. And that's why Yaakov concludes in the next pasuk that you will live and you won't die. When you have the opportunity in a time of danger to do something that will take care of your life, then take care of it and don't wait until the last possible opportunity. So regardless of which interpretation you follow over here, they all seem to be pointing that you should be preparing and stocking up, at least in a time of crisis. When the crisis is imminent, when it's there already, then you should be stocking up. So this source is pro-prepping. Okay, the Gemara in Tamid, Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph says, "Ezer Chacham Haroa Es Ha Nolad." Who is a wise person? One who sees the future. We're not talking about a fortune teller, but we're talking about somebody who can see the writing on the wall. When I wrote an article about this, I quoted in the context of the Jews who live in Galus, who don't see the writing on the wall. The writing should be clear as day that Galus is not a very friendly place to the Jews anymore, and God doesn't want the Jews to be there. They should already be preparing to come home, even though, of course, Israel has its own problems. But we know that it's a mitzvah to live in Israel. You're living among your own people in your own land, where Hashem is watching us with the greatest protection. And we have all these prophecies that say that Israel is going to go through a time of crisis, but we're going to get through it. Hashem is going to save us. What better place is there to be? If you're going to be in a time of crisis anyway, what better place is there to be than in the land of Israel among your own people, even though you have a bad government and you have a rotten media, etc., but this is still the best place to be. So Ezu Chacham, who is a wise person, one who sees the writing on the wall and doesn't play games with living in Galus and tries, well, I'll move this part of Galus to that part of Galus, or I'll play politics. It's time to just come home. That's seeing the future. But in a more general context, it means if you see that there's a problem on the horizon, if there seems to be an impending food shortage or some other crisis, you should take steps to prepare yourself for it. So this source also is pro-prepping. The next source is the Gemara Menachos Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Beis. That's 103b. Okay, so Rav Bibi said something in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. We're not going to get into it because it's off topic and it's complicated, but he stated something, and then he was challenged by other rabbis. They questioned him, and he didn't answer their question. So Amar le Rabbi Zreika. So Rabbi Zreika said to Rabbi Bibi, "My time lo kamahader mar. Why didn't you answer them? Right? You could have answered their challenge. Why did you stay quiet?" And he gives a fascinating response. Amar le. So Rabbi Bibi said to Rabbi Zreika, so Amar le. Sorry. This is still Rabbi Zreika talking. Amar le. No, sorry. This is Rabbi Bibi said. How could I possibly have answered them? The Amar Rabbi Chanan, because Rabbi Chanan said, it says in the curses in Dvarim that your life will be hanging in the balance, basically, that your life will be very uncertain from day to day from all the troubles that you're facing. So Rabbi Chanan explains that this means that is somebody who buys grain from year to year, meaning every year, once every year, he buys a full year's supply of grain and food. So now he's stocked up for an entire year. So I might think that if you have a year's worth of food, certainly many preppers will say this, that the goal should be to have a few weeks of food, a few months of food, but like the gold standard for many of them would be, if you're able to save up a year's worth of food, then in prepper terms, you are doing really, really well. Okay. And yet the pasuk says that if you have a year's worth of food sitting in your pantry, your life is hanging in the balance, that you actually have a lot to worry about, because what are you going to do at the end of the year? Right, at the end of the year, your food is going to run out, and maybe there won't be more food to buy, or maybe you won't have enough money to buy more food at the end of the year. So what are you going to do then? Right. So the ideal, Chazal says, if a person owns his own field and is growing his own food and is self-reliant, that is the ideal way to live, where you aren't dependent on purchasing food from other people, even if you're buying wholesale. Right, every year you're buying a full year's worth of food. Even that is not ideal, because you're still dependent on other people to grow and to supply the food for you. The ideal is to have a field. Now, of course, having a field doesn't solve all the problems. You still need the rain to fall, the crops to grow, the government to not confiscate your field. Right? You see, like they're doing to the farmers, they're taking away their fields. Of course, you still need Hashem to take care of you, but at the very minimum, you don't have middlemen. Right? You don't have to count on other people in the chain of bringing you food. It's just you and Hashem. Hashem brings you the rain. He causes the crops to grow, and you're not counting on any other people to do work for you. That is the best way to live. So Rabbi Bibi said, my mind is troubled because I only have a year's worth of food, and therefore I couldn't concentrate on giving a proper answer. I'm worried about the food. Okay, and then he goes on and says, "Ufachata laila v'yomam." So the pasuk by the curses says that you will be in fear by night and by day. So what's that referring to? That's somebody who doesn't have a year's worth of food. He has to buy food every Friday for the following week. So he only has a week's worth of food at a time. So that person is worried day and night, because what am I going to do at the end of next week if they run out of food, or I don't have enough money? That person clearly doesn't have the opportunity to buy a year's worth of food at a time, either because he doesn't have enough money to buy wholesale, or there isn't enough food around for him to buy a year's worth of food at a time. So that person is worried day and night. Maybe the grocery store will not stock up on food from week to week, and then I will run out very quickly. And the pasuk continues, amin. That's actually not what the pasuk says. It seems to be a typo. The pasuk says amin, and you will not trust in your own life that you'll be in an even greater level of fear. That is somebody who's counting on the baker. The baker doesn't make a week's worth of bread. The baker makes a day's worth of bread. Every day he's baking fresh bread. So if you're going to the bakery every single day to get your loaf of bread, and if one day the bakery is closed or the bakery runs out of flour, you're stuck, you have nothing, that's somebody who can't count on his own life. He doesn't even have a day's worth of food. He doesn't even have a backup plan if the bakery is closed. V'ahu gavra al palter samech. So Rabbi Bibi concluded and said, and this man, meaning me, is counting on the baker. I don't have a year's worth of food. I don't even have a week's worth of food. I'm counting on the baker. Okay. If I even had a year's worth of food, I would have reason to be very worried. But he says, I'm so terrified that I can't even think of an answer to the challenge, because I'm counting on the baker every single day. Now, as far as we know, Rabbi Bibi didn't starve to death. The baker seems to have come through and always had that fresh loaf of bread. But nevertheless, he couldn't count on having bread from one day to the next. And therefore, he was so worried that he had trouble learning, and he wasn't able to answer questions against him. So this source seems to be really pro-prepping. But as we will see, it conflicts very strongly with other sources. Okay. The main one being the mun, right? That's a perfect parallel. The Jews were in the desert. You had millions of Jews in the desert. They knew they were going to be there for an extended period of time, especially once they were punished for the spies. They knew they were going to be there for 39 more years. So there were millions of people who were going to need a lot of food for a very long time. And nevertheless, the mun fell for them exactly one day's portion every single day. And Hashem told them, he warned them to not try to save bread from one day to the next, not to gather from one day to the next, not to pinch pennies and try to save from one day to the next, except of course from Friday to Shabbos, because for Shabbos, the mun wouldn't fall. So for Friday to gather for Shabbos, that was fine. But normally the Jews could not even gather more than one day's worth of bread at a time, meaning they were counting on the baker. Hashem was baking them fresh mun every single day, and they were not allowed to count on more than one day's worth of bread at a time. That seems to conflict with the source. Why didn't Hashem tell them to gather 39 years worth of man, or at least 1 year's worth of man at a time? The man could have fallen once a year, and they could have gathered a year's worth of man, and they still would have had reason to worry. They still would have had to look to Hashem every year and worry, well, what's going to happen at the end of the year? But Hashem said, don't gather man from one day to the next. So we'll get back to this soon. All the sources so far, except for the source of the man, seem to be very, very pro-prepping, to gather as much as possible and no limits, to always be worried about the future. However, these sources are mitigated, and it's very important when we're learning the Torah that we learn all of the sources that from all the sides of the issue and put them all together, because all of them are true and all of them fit together like a puzzle. The way many people learn Torah is that they have an agenda. They're not really learning Torah, but they're using the Torah as a crutch to push their agenda. So somebody, let's say, is a prepper and is very pro-prepping, he'll quote all the sources that I mentioned so far, and he'll say, oh, see, the Torah says that everybody should prep. Now, that's not necessarily true, because they're taking it out of context. They're cherry-picking sources that are in line with their opinion, and they're saying the Torah is on my side. But as we will see, there are many sources that are anti-prepping. So the anti-preppers would say, don't do anything, sit on your hands and do nothing, and count on Hashem to save you. Now, there are times and places where you have to do nothing or do very little and count on Hashem to save you. However, that is not the global Torah perspective either. There are times where you have to do more work, and there are times that you step back a little bit and leave more room for Hashem to do the things that he needs to do. We have to put all the sources together and then to figure out what is the general perspective on prepping. And then when we're in a particular case, then we'll know which sources apply to our case. That is the right way to learn Torah. And that's why people should be asking, what does Hashem want of us? What does the Torah say? And to objectively study the sources, to clear our mind, to have no bias, to have no preconceived notions of what's right or wrong. Just have a blank slate and let the Torah speak to you. People who do that honestly will have the truth. People who come to the Torah with their bias will always be able to find a source in context or out of context that will back them up. But that's not the Torah's way of teaching, because that's just using the Torah as a crutch. But that's not the Torah's truth. There are always going to be sources on the other side of the issue. We have to learn all of them and put them all together. So the other sources, at least some of them, are as follows. Mishlei, Perek, Vav, it's chapter 6, Psukim, Vav to Yud Aleph, that's 6 to 11. So Mishlei from Shlomo says as follows. Lech el nemala otzel, lazy person, go to the ant. Re'ei deracheha v'chacham, see its ways and become wise. Learn wisdom from the ant. Asher ein la kotzin shoter umoshel, the ant doesn't have a leader, an officer, a ruler, meaning the ants are free. Ants don't have governments. Okay, every ant is free to do anything he wants. Tachin bakayetz lachma, they gather its bread in the summertime, meaning they gather the grain that they need, their food. Agra v'katzir ma'achala, they gather in the harvest their food. Admasa, so learn from the ant. Chazal tell us that an ant lives an average of six months. The average lifespan of an ant is only 6 months, and during that time, they only need a grain and a half of wheat. And nevertheless, they spend their entire lifetimes gathering food. If you ever see an ant, all they're doing is running from place to place, gathering food and bringing it back. That's all ants do. They spend their entire lives doing it. And why do they do it? Chazal tell us, because the ant knows it's not going to live very long. And even though it only needs a relatively small amount of food to live for the 6 months, it says, maybe Hashem is going to give me extra life, right? Maybe Hashem will allow me to live longer. So just in case, I'm going to gather more food. So the ant is truly a prepper. He spends his entire life gathering food, even though he knows he has a terminal case of ant lifespan of only 6 months, but maybe I will get an extension just in case I'm going to gather food. So Mishlei continues, Ad masai otzel tishkav, until when are you going to lay down in bed and sleep, you lazy person? Masai takum mishnasecha, when will you get up from your sleep? Ma'at shenos, ma'at tenumos, a little bit of sleep, a little bit of slumber. That's what the lazy person says. He turns over, he hits the snooze button on his alarm clock. Fine, let me just sleep a little longer. Ma'at chibuk yadayim lishkav, let me just fold my hands a little bit and lay down. Uba kimahalech reishecha, your poverty will come like a traveler, like a guest. Umachsarcha ki'ish magain, and your shortage, your lacking will come like a man with a shield, meaning that you sleep a little longer. You're always making excuses to not be working and doing something and preparing for the future. ultimately you are going to become impoverished. So Mishli seems to be saying very, very clearly, go prep. In fact, to learn wisdom from the ants, that's all the ant does with his life is prep. Now we know that the Torah perspective is that a person should not spend his entire life working and raising money, because there's no limit to the amount of time a person can spend working. There's no limit to the amount of money a person can try to reach. The wealthiest people in the world are not sitting and studying Torah. They're sitting and trying to earn even more money. They're starting more companies and investing in more stocks and more companies. It's like points in a video game. They already have more money than they could ever possibly spend in 20 lifetimes. And yet all they're doing is working. They're working harder than most other people, and they're under a great deal of stress. Why? Because those people are living the lives of ants. Some of them are doing it only for fun, but many of them are doing it because they don't have any meaning in their lives. The only meaning that they have in their lives is to gather as much money as possible. So after they have enough for their children and their grandchildren, their great children and great grandchildren until the very end of time, they'll still keep working. Many Jews who live in Galus say, I'll come to Israel when I have enough money. When do you ever have enough money? For these people, the answer is never, because you can always stay there a little longer in theory and earn a little more money and have enough for your children and your grandchildren and so on. Right. And, so those people are living the lives of ants. That's clearly not the Torah perspective. And in fact, Chazal say, of course, the pshat of these psukim is to teach us the principle that hard work is valued by the Torah. The Torah doesn't want people to be taking naps all day and sleeping all the time and being lazy, but you should use your time for productive purposes. And part of that is working for a living. However, Chazal say that this is a mashal. It's a metaphor for learning Torah and doing mitzvos. Right? How long are you going to live in this world? We don't know, but it's a relatively short span of time in the course of history. So gather as much for the ultimate journey that we all have to make to the next world. Prep for that, right? We're not bringing our money with us to the next world. We're bringing our mitzvos. We're bringing our merits. So learn as much Torah and do as many mitzvos as you can while you are in this world. Don't waste your time. Now, the ant doesn't have any mitzvos to do, so he might as well gather food. What if the ant gathered, 5 bushels of grain? And he said, you know what, I gathered enough. I'm going to take it easy. What else is there for the ant to do? He has no Torah, he has no mitzvahs. He might as well gather some more, might as well stay active. So that's the lesson that we learned from the ant, is find something positive to do with your time, because maybe it will have some benefit. But the Jew who has Torah and mitzvahs to do, you work a little bit, you gather enough money to get by. If Hashem blesses you, then you won't have to work too hard and you'll have more than you need to get by, and you'll have an easy life, but then spend the bulk of your time engaged in Torah and mitzvah. So this source is misleading in the sense that the pshat indicates extreme prepping, but that can't possibly what it be, because it runs counter to everything that we know about the Torah, that we're not supposed to live like ants. And therefore, the real deeper meaning of this is davka, not to spend your entire life prepping, to do the things that you need to do to get by, certainly to work for a living, but spend most of your time prepping for the next world. So that's a very important source from Mishli. The ultimate prepper from the Torah is the last king that we had during the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, Tzidkiyahu. Okay, so he knew that the Beis HaMikdash was very likely to be destroyed, right? They were already a vassal state to Bavel, and he rebelled against the king of Bavel, and the city was under siege. He knew that he was in big trouble. So what did he do? He prepared a very long underground tunnel going all the way from the area of the Beis HaMikdash to the plains to the plains of Richo. Okay, very, very long tunnel. So when the army of Bavel came to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, he fled. He went underground to the tunnel and he fled. Okay, and he popped out the other side. So he spent a long time and a lot of money building this escape tunnel. Presumably, he had a safe place to stay over there and a lot of food. He didn't just prepare a tunnel. I'm sure he had plans beyond that as well. So he was prepping for this war. And Chazal said, what happened? Hashem you can't outsmart Hashem. Hashem wanted him to be captured. Hashem wanted him to be punished. So Hashem made a deer run along the roof of the tunnel. And some of the Babylonian soldiers were intrigued by this deer. So they started to follow it. And the deer was running, seeming to have some kind of a purpose or a pattern to its running. So the soldiers were chasing after the deer. And just as Tzidkiyahu was emerging on the other side of the tunnel, the deer was there and the soldiers above it were there, and they captured him. So this source indicates that all of the prepping is for naught if Hashem wants to get you, right? A person can gather all the food he wants for a shortage, but if Hashem doesn't want that person to be full during a time of a famine, the food will spoil, the goyim will steal his food, the government will take his food away, they'll take him out of his house, they'll take him away from his food, right? One way or another, things are not going to work out. So this source is really anti-prepping. It's saying that the only way really to prepare for times of crisis is to do tshuva and daven to Hashem to save you, because you can do all the human things that you want, but if Hashem makes a gzeira against you, you're not going to make it. The people who make it through the impending war of Gog Magog, just like the people who made it through the Holocaust, are not necessarily going to be the biggest, strongest, richest people, or the people who prepared the most. Those will be the people that Hashem handpicked. And we don't know why Hashem chooses one to live and one person not to live. But the bottom line is, it's not going to be the people who stock up on the most food and the most guns and the most money and the most gold and all these things and try to outsmart the system and try to stay one step ahead of the tyrants. It's not going to be those people. It's going to be the ones that Hashem handpicks to save. So the most important way of preparing is to get on Hashem's good side. Now, that doesn't mean you should go to the opposite extreme and not to prepare at all. As we've seen from other sources, a person should prepare when you know that there is an impending crisis and there are things within your power to do that are rational, reasonable, normal. These are things that normal people are doing. Then you should do what normal people are doing. But you shouldn't go to an extreme and think that you're going to outsmart the system, because that is kind of like living like an ant. An ant has a crisis and he's only going to live for 6 months. Okay, so you don't want to live like that, even in the times of crisis, and to be totally obsessed with preparing for everything that could possibly go wrong, especially when we're living in times like now, where we're being attacked from all sides, right? If a person is living in a place like Florida, where every so often there are storms, so you know what you have to do to prepare for a storm. You stock up on food and water. You seal up your doors and windows. You have flashlights, generator, etc. You do the basic things that you need to do to get through a storm, because that is one crisis, that is one problem that comes very, very often, and you already know the normal things to do. So that's something that everybody, if you live in a place where there's storms, then you have to do the normal things in order to get ready for the storm. Okay, but if you're living in a place where everything is going wrong, where the government is attacking you every which way, where they're poisoning the air and the food and the water, and they're trying to steal people's money, and they're making camps, and they're doing all the crazy things that they're doing, it's impossible to prepare for the end of the world. This is not a normal crisis. This is an end of times crisis. There's no amount of prepping that anybody can do where he would be able to say, now I've covered my bases. It's totally impossible. And therefore, in a time like this, the only thing that we can do is count on Hashem. So if they have a sale on rice and beans, there's nothing wrong with stocking up a little bit and taking advantage of the sale. But to become obsessed with this, as some people are, is not the Torah approach. It's not what Hashem wants you to do. Hashem doesn't expect people to do this, and he's not going to choose to save those people who are going to extreme lengths to stock up on things, because that's not what he wants of us right now. Don't think that all the holy Jews that don't have the money to stock up, even if they wanted to, they're barely making ends meet as it is. Okay, so there's no way that they could possibly prep. Hashem is not going to abandon them, these righteous, holy people that are davening to him. Hashem is not going to abandon them and punish them for not prepping when it wasn't possible. So that's not the baseline. That's not what we need to focus on. Again, if there's something normal, rational that people can do, then fine, do it. But don't think that that's what's going to save you. Okay, the next source is from Sota, Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis. And it says there that one who has enough bread for today and he worries about what he's going to eat tomorrow is short on faith. He doesn't have enough trust in Hashem, like the Jews in the desert, right? That was the lesson that Hashem was teaching Jews. Again, those Jews were in the ultimate state of crisis. They're in a desert with no food and water, millions of people. Okay, it's impossible to feed all those people in the desert. And yet Hashem only gave them 1 day's worth of bread at a time to teach them this lesson. If Hashem took care of you today, then trust that he'll take care of you tomorrow also. Don't worry about tomorrow. This is a very high level of faith. It's very difficult to reach that level. I would be lying if I said I'm on that level. If my pantry, if my cupboards only had enough food for 3 meals, I'd probably be a little bit worried. I'm not on the highest level of faith, but at least I know that I have something to work on. I know that I'm not on the highest level of faith, that the Torah expects more of me. Okay, so certainly if we have more than a day's worth of bread, we shouldn't be sitting and worrying and panicking about all the problems that the government is bringing upon us, the World Economic Forum. Yeah, they have terrible, evil plans for us, but Hashem took care of us today. Hashem took care of us yesterday. He'll take care of us tomorrow also. If we do the right thing and we stick with Hashem, he will see us through. And if we're sitting and worrying about all the things that can go wrong, every headline, every threat that the bad guys are making, we are short on faith. Again, we have to learn from the mun. That was a critical lesson. And we'll wrap this up. I said we started with Miketz this week's parsha. We're going to finish with the source from there that ties it all together. That is a few psukim before what we started with. This comes from Perek Mem Aleph, Pasuk Nun Hey. chapter 41, verse 55. Vatirav kol eretz Mitzrayim, and the whole land of Egypt became hungry. This was at the very beginning of the famine. Vayitzak ha'am el paro lalochem. The people went screaming to Paro for bread. Vayomer Paro l'chol Mitzrayim, and Paro said to all of Egypt, Lichu el Yosef, go to Yosef, asher yomar lochem ta'asu. Do whatever he tells you to do. Now, this is very strange. Why were they starving at the very beginning of the famine? Yosef, when he interpreted the dreams at the beginning of the parsha, he told them that you're going to have 7 years of plenty, which will be followed by 7 years of famine. During the 7 years of plenty, save everything, stock up on all those 7 years of produce, because that will see you through the times of famine. And it says that that's exactly what the Egyptians did. They followed his instructions, and everybody saved up food, and they amassed a tremendous amount of food. So why were they all starving? Right? Doesn't seem to make any sense. So Rashi explains, Vatirav kol eretz Mitzrayim. Why did they all go starving? Shehir kiva tivu asam she'atzru. All the food that they gathered spoiled. Chutz mishel Yosef, except Yosef's food, because this was part of Hashem's plan. Hashem wanted Yosef to be the mover and shaker. He wanted Yosef to have all the food. He wanted his plan to unfold in this particular way, and it wouldn't have unfolded that way if all the Egyptians had plenty of food, and if everybody who saved food during the years of plenty had food. He needed everybody to be starving, so they would all have to go to Yosef, and one thing would lead to another. So everybody's food spoiled except for Yosef. So these people did everything that they were instructed to do. They actually knew with certainty what was going to happen. It's not like today where we don't know with certainty what's going to happen. Of course, we're privy to some of the evil plans of the one world government. We know what they intend for us, but we don't know from one day to the next what's real, what's not real, what they're going to manage to do, what they're not going to manage to do, what their timetable is, how things are going to work out. We don't know. Yosef gave them essentially a prophecy. This is exactly when the famine is going to start. This is when the famine is going to end. And this is what you need to do to get through it. They knew exactly with absolute clarity what to do. And they did everything right. And it still failed for them because Hashem wanted them to run out of food. So this is the most critical lesson for our times, I think. Again, that you have to put your faith in Hashem. If there's something reasonable to do, fine, do it. But don't put your faith in that, because ultimately Hashem's plan has to unfold. We're only going to get through it if we attach ourselves to Hashem, and Hashem's plan will unfold the way he wants it to. There's no way to cheat the system. You can stock up on all the food and ammo and gold, etc., that you want. It's meaningless. It's meaningless. It's not going to get you through this. Okay. And that's why Paro told them, do everything that Yosef said. The next Rashi says, so Amar Lahem, Paro said to them, Lama lo vartem bor. Why didn't you gather grain? Didn't Yosef announce to you that years of famine are coming? Amru lo. So the Egyptians said to Paro, Asafnu harbe. We gathered a lot, v'hir kiva, and it rotted. Amar lahem. Paro said to them, Imkain, if that's the case, call asher yom el chantasu. Then do whatever Yosef tells to you. Hare gazar ala tvul v'hir kiva. Paro was a superstitious man. He said Yosef must have ordained for the grain to spoil. Yosef must have special powers, and he said that your grain should spoil. Ma'im yigzar aleinu v'namas. What if Yosef makes a gzeira? Yosef rules. Yosef makes a law, essentially, that we should all die. Yosef is a very powerful man. He has some kind of a spiritual power. And if he says that your grain spoils and it spoils, if he says we'll die, we'll die. So just do anything Yosef says. So this is, again, the ultimate lesson, to not count on having all the food, because the Egyptians, in fact, did everything right and they were still starving and they needed Hashem to pull them through. So again, bottom line is, prepping in general, not in the times of crisis, is a good idea in the sense that you should have a way of accessing food that is not dependent on other people. Ideally, I mean, people who live in cities today, it's not so practical. We have to go to the bakery. We have to go to the grocery store. So we do have to be worried about that. At least the Torah is teaching that ideally, we should all have farmland. I'm not telling everybody to go run to the countryside and buy farms, as some people are doing. It may be a good idea. For some people, it may not be a good idea. Again, I don't think that's what's going to save us. But at least in principle, if times are normal, if we're living in normal times and we're not worried about the government killing us, then it is a good idea for people to be able to grow their own food and to have a large supply of food on hand. So then they have the peace of mind. They don't have to worry about food. They'll be able to learn Torah properly, right? Why did Rav Bibi want food? Because he couldn't concentrate on his Torah. He was too worried. It's natural and it's normal that if you don't have food, that you're going to be at least thinking about, what am I going to do tomorrow to get food? Even if you have faith in Hashem, it'll still be on your mind, and it'll make it more difficult to focus on your Torah. So it's good to not be reliant on other people to have food in normal times. in times of crisis, like a famine, a food shortage, then do what's normal for people to do, especially if you have food on hand. Then you shouldn't be showing off. You shouldn't be making people jealous. You shouldn't be drawing attention to yourself. You should do the things that are normal. And I would say, even when things are good, you shouldn't be showing off how much you have. There's no reason to make people jealous. The Jews in Gullus, I think, are very guilty of this in general. And this is a long-standing problem, that if they're prosperous, they have to show off their wealth to everybody. The Goyim are jealous. Their fellow Jews are jealous. It only leads to a rat race. It's not good. If God blesses you with money, do good things with the money. Thank Hashem for the money. Live a moderately pleasant lifestyle, but you don't have to go overboard. You certainly don't have to show off to the rest of the world and make people gullus, and make people jealous, especially if you are in gullus. That is not the right way to live. And that is a very, very important lesson. If you're living in a times of existential worldwide crisis like we are today, the Gog Magog times, then it doesn't even pay to waste your time trying to prep for every possible scenario, because the game is fixed against you anyway. And it really, the best way of prepping is to turn to Hashem, to do things that are normal, but don't worry about it too much. Don't fret over it. Don't get stressed out. Just live life normally. Count on Hashem to save us, and be confident that He will. Okay, let me see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions. Again, I put the links to the 2 articles that have the sources and some other commentary if you'd like to read that. And since there are no questions, I will stop the recording and look forward to seeing you all next week.